Welcome to another episode of New England Horror Files podcast. Tonight, we're going to give a very warm welcome to Peter Muise. Peter Muise is a New England native who lives in the Boston area. He's the author of two books, Legends and Lore of the North Shore, as well as Witches and Warlocks of Massachusetts. Since 2008, he's blogged at newenglandfolklore.blogspot.com. Peter, thank you for coming on tonight. I really appreciate you being with us tonight.
Great, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I always like to talk about weird stories with people who like weird stories. So
yeah, me too. So tell me, what are we talking about tonight, Peter?
Well, I'd like to talk about monster stories.
Yes.
I like them. I like a good monster story, and I spent some time kind of going through my files in my blog to kind of find some of the weirder stories that I personally really like. So they may not be the most well-known stories, but they are kind of like, I don't know, weirder and interesting stories to me, I think.
Yeah, no, before we started talking, we had been looking over just different folklore, different legends, different, personal accounts and people we knew of material we could use for the channel. And I came across your website and I was like, how everything was not really, there's a couple stories that weren't really well known, like you're saying, but I was just very intrigued by them. I was like, this sort of thing is New England based, I think it was, what did I read? It was something about the mermaid, the siren.
Oh yeah, mermaids. Yeah, we can talk those if we talk about mermaids if we get a chance. It's really like people don't think of that these days as much, but there is a lot of mermaid history, I think, in New England, right? And I guess when you think about it, like it's New England, right? So the people who kind of created this area as we know it today came from England. In the 1600s, Puritans mostly came here. And when they came, they kind of brought their folklore with them. So if you look at the oldest sort of legends and stories in New England, most of them are about witches, the devil, and ghosts. Those are sort of the types of folklore brought over with them from England. But some people also, you have some sort of sea monster stories, and you also have some mermaid stories that come over as well, because those were also part of English folklore. So you do see those stories about mermaids as well in there. You don't see, they didn't bring over stories about giants or dragons really, or fairies. We can talk about fairies if we get a chance, but they didn't really bring that over either. I think particularly I'm most familiar with Massachusetts. And like the Puritans who came from Massachusetts came from an area called East Anglia, which is just, region in kind of southern England. But they didn't have any fairy folklore. They had a lot of witch folklore and devil folklore. So you see that kind of reflected in New England's history. Like so much, like East Anglia had the biggest witchcraft trials, and therefore you see the biggest witchcraft trials in New England too, because they all came from East Anglia and brought that kind of witch craze with them, I think. Yeah, so monsters, I love them. I do want to say something about monsters, and like, I think of myself as a situational skeptic, right? Like, sitting here in my condo with the lights on a summer day, like I'm not a huge necessarily believer in the reality of all these monsters. If you put me out in the woods at night, I would be a different situation, right? That's why I don't go in the woods at night, because I don't want to be scared. So, or I don't want to get ticks on me. It's kind of that balance. Like, I don't want to be scared. I don't want to get ticks on me.
Right? Nobody likes ticks.
Nobody likes ticks. So I kind of stay, in the city more. But so when I talk about monsters, I like to talk about, we're going to talk about stories about monsters, right? I'm not necessarily talking just about the monster itself, but like the story about the monster, where it comes from, who tells it, like all that stuff, how maybe it changes over time and things like that.
I love it.
What I want to think about. Yeah, stories about monsters. So
that's also interesting when you look at where the history, like you said, the history of witchcraft and all, or witch trials and things like that going back. And we did a Dogman episode, I don't know, a few episodes back, and in our research we found how far back the trials go, like like werewolf trials, and I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, people, this is a thing,
Yeah, and often like the werewolf overlaps, I think, with the witch in folklore. Like you see witches in witch trials who can turn into animals, like they turn into cats maybe, or they turn into like, there's witch stories where a witch turns into a horse or something like that. So what's the difference between a witch who turns into a cat or a horse, or a witch who turns into a wolf, right? It's kind of
right.
And often it's all a gift from the devil sometimes. The devil gives you the ability to turn into a wolf or the ability to turn into a cat. So it's very blurry, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Some people, like some kind of cringier scholars, will say that like all of that is like a holdover from sort of shamanic beliefs, right? The idea that you can send your soul out of your body and it may take an animal form or something like that. And it gets kind of
Right.
filtered through a Christian worldview where anyone who could do that would be evil. So it's sort of an interesting
Right.
thing to think about. If you look at like Norse mythology, there are some stories where like a warrior, say, is asleep in his house and his spirit is projected out in the form of a bear or a wolf and battles with another warrior who's also asleep. And you have these two animals fighting, and one of them kills
Yeah.
the warrior, dies in his sleep, right? But that's kind of a similar idea, but it wasn't in a non-Christian vibe, I think, there.
On that note too, we did dive into this a little bit with our Dogman episode, and very specifically I believe they were Celtic warriors that we talked about, but the same idea where that the warriors were, and they could transform into animals. But if you go into other cultures throughout the world, how that's like it is I don't want to say a theme, but there's other, we have skinwalkers, for example, which you're not supposed to say the word, but I said it. So like, it's very interesting how you can kind of trace these things and, what different cultures believe. I find it so fascinating and to talk about.
Yeah, so it's all very interesting. And I want to talk tonight about some of the weirder monsters in New England. And as I was looking through my list, a lot of them are sort of human-animal hybrids, right? So often, to me, very fascinating. I don't know why. Like just like a monstrous snake or a sea serpent is like if I saw one, I would be scared. But it's not as interesting to me as something that has like a human shape. Like something that's part to me is scarier than something that's just an animal.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like an abomination or something. It's
right. It shouldn't be. It's just something a human animal hybrid
exist.
does not exist. It's driving me crazy. Like
right.
Like you see a bear is intimidating, but if you see like a human with a bear's head, you'd be like, "Ooh, this is so freaky."
Something else.
Something else entirely. So one of the first, like one of my favorite stories, I guess, no, they're all my favorite. Like a goatmen stories. I found 3 goatmen stories from New England. And you see goatmen in other parts of the country, like I think Texas has a well-known goatman who sort of haunts a bridge and things like that. But in New England, I found 3 goatman stories, and the oldest one is supposedly from the 1950s. I found it in a book called New England Graveside Tales by a writer named T.M. Gray. And she wrote a couple books about New England legends. She also writes horror novels. And I emailed her to ask where this stories came from, but I never heard back. So I don't know where the story came from, but that's where I found it in her book. So it's 1950s, a town called Cherryfield, Maine, which is not a big town. And a guy is driving through the woods in his pickup truck. He's going down like sort of a logging road, so there's nobody else there, just him and his pickup truck driving down this wooded road. And I think it's cold, it's like November or something like that. As he's driving, listening to the radio, suddenly the truck grinds to a halt. He looks at the gas meter and it says the tank is completely empty, which freaks him out since he had just filled up the tank before he went driving in the woods. So gets out of the... Mary's shaking her head. No.
I know. I'm like, oh God, I'm imagining being here.
Right, exactly. In the middle of the woods, your truck is dead. You're like, oh, this is bad. So he gets out of the truck and he looks underneath. He expects to see like, a big leak of gas came out the bottom. There's nothing. There's no leak. There's nothing. He looks in the tank. It is indeed empty. So then as he sort of gets up from looking at the truck, he sees a guy coming out of the woods. And this man is wearing a red flannel shirt. And he's walking out of the woods. And he walks up the middle of the road. And the guy in the truck notices that this man in the red flannel shirt has the legs of a goat and horns on his head. So he's naked from the waist down, just has goat legs, but he's wearing a red flannel shirt because, of course, it's Maine. That's what you wear, even if you're a satyr or whatever this guy is, you wear a red flannel shirt. And the guy in the truck is, of course, freaked out, as you would be. And the goat man, the satyr, or whatever he is, just kind of smiles at the guy by the truck and then just keeps walking into the woods.
No.
Yes, the guy in the truck is freaked out, goes back in the truck, locks the door, and notices then that his tank is full, and he's able to start the truck and drive away. And that's the only time he ever saw this goat man. So this is supposedly from the 1950s, which it's a good story. I like it. It's creepy, right? And it kind of has to me that, like if you hear about UFO encounters, often like machines don't work, right? Like somebody's car will shut down or their phones don't work or whatever. So it has that vibe, right? But it's very specific. Like the tank, all the gas in the tank disappears, but then it comes back. So it's kind of the same idea, but just works in a different way, you know.
That's interesting. I've been to Gettysburg a multitude of times, and we always have equipment failure. Always, whether it's a laptop, an SD card, a camera, a phone, and it doesn't matter. And it's happened multiple times. So that's interesting on a lot of different levels. I think the equipment failure part of things.
Yeah,
but mysterious and weird equipment failure because then it works again. You know, like
right.
I believe it.
Like I said, I'm kind of a skeptic, but we went to the Ramtail Mill complex in Rhode Island, in Gloucester, Rhode Island, and I was taking photos with an iPhone, and some of the photos came out completely white. So like, how did that happen with an iPhone? You know, that's the only time it ever happened to me. You know? And I was a little creepy. It was a little creepy.
Let me tell you, I want to just interject a quick. It's funny that you mentioned, and maybe I'm going completely off, but you said, you know, creepy. So we have a story from Gettysburg, my husband and I, and it involves a man, like a specific man. He looks a certain way, and we see him in different places that we go, and it's just a weird thing. Like, was that our guy? Like, we just see this guy. We'll go because we go to creepy places. Like, we go to Gettysburg. We've been to. So we do Gettysburg, and another time later we go to Ramtail Factory, and we see the guy there. And it's funny that you just mentioned Ramtail Factory after I just mentioned Gettysburg.
Right.
So I wanted to mention that because that just was like, whoa, you know, and I like to consider myself a skeptic with things, or like a curious skeptic. And I'll believe what I've experienced some crazy things in my life, but like, I'm always like, all right, well, what's the logical explanation? You know, like, so that's kind of where I come from, but I've definitely like creepy things happen, you know, like just
that's definitely like an odd coincidence though. Because even though people go to Gettysburg, it's a famously haunted spot. You know, it's one of those spots. Same thing with different areas of Rhode Island. I think Ramtail Factory being one of them. So it's like he could just be another enthusiast, ghost hunter, what have you.
Yeah,
but it's weird. That's very.
It's just a thing that
have you ever talked to him?
Let's get him on the show.
Yeah, actually, now our Gettysburg story, we haven't told it on this channel because it's not in New England. But my husband and I have recorded it. So I'm not going to get so into it, but we had a very profound experience in I consider Gettysburg to be one of the, if not the, compared to Newport, Rhode Island, like we talked about earlier, one of the most haunted places in America. It's really nuts in Gettysburg. It's an amazing experience. I implore people to visit, but it is haunted if you're going to be open to that. So we had a very profound experience, and it was all, what's the word? Before it happened at a hotel, and it was that man who we encountered on the battlefield. I think he had Massachusetts plates, or we had Massachusetts or Rhode Island plates on the car, and that's why he approached us. Because we lived in Rhode Island at the time, and that's why he approached us. And he said, "Oh, you're looking for a hotel?" We're like, "Actually, we are." And he's like, "Well, what about this hotel?" And we're like, "Oh, okay, cool, thanks." And we're like, "Okay, let's go." And we go to the hotel and end up having this insane experience overnight with hauntings and whatnot. And it's just funny that he's the one who told us to go there.
Right.
So. And then, but I think that's actually the only time we've actually talked to him. So that's a slight, off the trail that I'm doing right now. But it struck me as odd that the sequence of conversation was like, mirrored to the sequence of experiences we've had that were weird,
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God. So anyway, I digress. Let's move on.
Right.
I'll tell Gettysburg one day. But.
Second Goatman story. Goatman number 2. This one's a little more cryptic, a little shorter. This is from the 1960s, supposedly, a town called Jericho, Vermont. there is some sort of housing development built there called the Mountain View Housing Development. And the new residents of that development see somebody looking in the windows of their houses, which is always never good. And people say that it is a man who is half man, half goat, who's been looking in their windows. And this goes on for a while, and then the goat man just disappears and is never seen again. And some people said he maybe has been seen in the mountains nearby, but that one's really brief. And that's from a book called The Vermont Monster Guide by Joseph Citro. Does anybody know Joseph Citro? He's a big Vermont writer. He's great. You can't go wrong with his books, I don't think.
No, he's got a lot of good Vermont stories for sure.
He does.
He does. Yeah, lots of books he has.
Yeah. The last one, I'm trying to do them chronologically, is from Sandwich, Massachusetts, down on Cape Cod, the 1970s, the golden age, right? Late 1970s, an 11-year-old boy is home alone. It's a snowy Saturday in December. His parents have gone out to do chores, whatever. Maybe they're going to yard sales or whatever you do what do you do in Cape Cod in this winter? Probably not a yard sale, I guess. Grocery shopping. He's home alone. He is watching TV. He's sitting on the floor. He's watching TV. And there was a window right above the TV set. So he's watching TV, wherever he's watching, Super Friends, Scooby-Doo, I don't know what he's watching, 1970s. And then he looks up from the TV for some reason, and he sees a hairy man's face looking in the window at him watching TV. The kid screams his head off, and the thing looking in the window screams too, and disappears. And the kid is freaked out. He is freaked out. So he's afraid to go outside. So he calls his friends first and asks them if they have pulled a prank on him. He's like, is this a joke? Did you come here to try to scare me? Like, no, we didn't do it. We wouldn't do that to you. So he invites his friends to come over. They come to the house, and there's sort of bravery in numbers or whatever it is. And so they go out into the backyard to look and see if they can see any footprints in the snow from this thing that's looking in the window. And what they see in the snow are cloven hoof prints leading from the house into the woods.
Ooh.
And that's the end of the show. And I'm like, eee.
Right? Cloven hooves are always creepy.
Never a good sign. And it's interesting. That's from the Bigfoot Research Organization website. So it's like you think, even on the website, like, oh, they're going to see Bigfoot footprints. But they don't. They see cloven footprints, which is spooky. I think that's spooky to me. Like, it's because even if they saw the regular Bigfoot prints, like, okay, it was a Bigfoot. But the cloven footprints, you're like, well, what the hell is that? Is that a devil? Is it a demon? Is it a goat man? What is it? A satyr?
Yeah, it's like that. When you cross the human and animal, it's creepy. But then when you cross like other animals, it's also like, well, and Bigfoot's not even like it. Well, we don't know, I guess, but like
when cryptids cross, what is this?
True.
Too much. So those are the Goatman stories I know, which I like. I wish there were more of them, but those are the only three I've found. But it's interesting, like monsters looking in windows. It's like such a theme, I think, in monster stories or your paranormal stories. Like there's always something trying to look in your window, and just even when I was a kid, I was born in like 1967, so I was a kid in the early to mid 70s, where Bigfoot and all that was a big thing on TV, like In Search of, all those shows, Bionic Bigfoot, whatever. And my brother was a little older than me, so he would buy lots of spooky books. And I remember that he was always a little freaked out that Bigfoot might look in our bedroom window, although we were on the second floor. Like, we were on the second floor. That would have to be a really tall Bigfoot to look in the second floor, but, you know. But it's like, you see that a lot in these stories. Like, there's a monster outside the house, and it's looking in your window. What does that want? I don't know.
I think that's still a very real fear of mine. Like, it's not like a crippling fear or anything, but it's always on my mind, like at nighttime. Like, oh my God, the blinds are open, you know, and I gotta shut them. Or who's the Almost Canon, actually a few months ago, Almost Canon podcast, he posted a video where they pan with the cell phone, I guess, or whatever it is, and it slowly focuses on a face in the window, and it's the scariest video. No, it's so creepy, I can't even. And they call it, you know, it's a Bigfoot video or whatever. That, you know, it's like a somebody sent the video in, and it's absolutely terrifying. I'm just like, no, I can't do it. Not doing it. I can't even watch this. No, yeah. So that's definitely like, what do they call that? Fear number 25. I don't know. It's
Yeah. Yeah, when I was a kid, I remember we had watched a dinosaur movie. I can't remember what the movie was even. I was a very little kid. But there was a Neanderthal man, and I thought he was kind of freaky, this Neanderthal man. So then I had a nightmare where the Neanderthal man was looking at the window. I was like, ah, like that freaked me out. I still remember it, right? I had the dream probably when I was 5. But I still have that vivid memory of like this hairy thing with big, heavy brows looking at them. I was like, ugh.
Yeah. And it's like you said about, what did you call it? Situational. When you're
Skepticism.
actually, yeah, like, because when you're actually out in the woods, like, it's one thing, like, to sit here and just talk about it, but if you're actually in the woods and you hear something, you don't know what it is, or you see some eye shine that you don't know what it is, it definitely increases the, oh my god, what was that? Yeah. So it's, now I'm thinking about things looking in the window at night, and I'm just like, oh god.
Jeez, it's gonna be a long night.
I know, right? Awesome.
So we want to work our way through the barnyard. I want to talk about the Pigman. Do you know about the Pigman of North Vermont?
I live in Vermont, so
so maybe you'd have seen the Pigman.
I have not seen the Pigman, but I've definitely heard about it. And the Pigman, when we used to live in Rhode Island, and when we lived there and came up here a lot, we actually came up here like, let's go to Northfield, And we actually tried. We went during mud season, so we didn't get very far into the woods. We didn't know anything about mud season when we were Rhode Islanders, so we didn't get very far. But I can't say that I've seen the Pigman. However, I have a friend, legitimately, who when she's trying to get her kids to behave, she threatens them with the Pigman.
That's great.
And I'm
terrible.
It's a little shocking. I'm like, oh my god, what if? Pigman's terrifying.
Well, speaking of like monsters looking in windows, when I was a kid, one of my friend's older sisters babysat me and my brother. And I remember this very vividly. She told this story because it was time for us to go to bed. And she's like, the story was basically one like this. The boogeyman was walking down the street. It was your street. The boogeyman came to a house. It was your house. The boogeyman climbed up the wall. It was the wall of your house. The boogeyman looked in the window. It was the window of your bedroom. But you were both asleep, so he left you alone and went away.
What? Oh my gosh.
It's Thanks crazy for ruining my childhood.
I know, right? I want to say I feel like I've heard that before, though. Like, it struck some kind of a chord in my psyche. Oh gosh.
It's there again, a monster looking in the window, right? So let's tell some Pigman stories, because we went up there too to try to find a way. So,
nice.
Pigman stories, again, this comes from Joseph Citro, was the person who unleashed the Pigman on the world, basically. And he heard it from a guy named Jeff Hatch, who lived in Northfield, Vermont. So Jeff Hatch is probably the first person who really told a Pigman story. So according to Jeff Hatch, 1971 in Northfield, a farmer's son disappears. He just vanishes. And it was like that time of late 60s, early 70s when, teenagers were running away to the city, California, whatever. People thought, maybe he just ran away to become a hippie or whatever. Like, we shouldn't worry that much about it. A few weeks later, though, somebody in town hears an animal or something digging around in their trash at night. They think maybe it's a raccoon, maybe it's a dog, whatever. So they turn on their porch light and they see a naked man covered in short white hair all over his body with the head of a pig eating from their trash cans. They are, of course, freaked out, and the light scares the Pigman away. So that's kind of a creepy story, right? At the very beginning. A little later, this is where Jeff Hatch comes in. It's a high school dance at Northfield High. I don't know how big Northfield High is, but they're having a dance. And some of the kids are out in the back behind the school in a sand pit. Sand pits are one of those liminal zones, right? Like where you can expect bad things to happen. Some kids are out in a sand pit smoking and drinking. And they see something come out of the underbrush. And it is a naked man covered with short white hair with a pig's head. And the teenager who was smoking and drinking run into the gymnasium with the dancers saying, oh my God, we saw a man with a pig's head. It's terrifying. So some of the other kids, including Jeff Hatch, run out there to try to see if they can catch sight of this pig man. They do not see a pig man, but they do see what looks like a nest in the grass, where all the grass has been beaten down, and it's like something had been sleeping in the underbrush, which they say, oh, maybe this is proof that there is a pigman. So rumors start to fly around town about who is this pigman, right? Is it perhaps the farmer's son who went missing? Why did he suddenly have a pig's head? Nobody knows, right? Some people say that this is really risque, we'll just say it anyway, that he is the offspring perhaps of a farmer who got lonely and a pig. Let's face it, biology doesn't really work that way, but that's the story. So that's kind of the story. And some people at first see the pigman around an abandoned pig farm, which makes sense, right? Pigman, abandoned pig farm. But then later, more people start to see him around the Devil's Wash Bowl, which is this kind of rocky, watery feature up on the hills outside Northfield. And this is when my husband and I went up there in, was it 2003, I think it was? We went to Vermont to visit a friend. We stopped a bunch of folklore sites. So I said, we have to go to see the Devil's Wash Bowl. And so the road is called Devil's Wash Bowl Road. And we found it on Google's map, but someone had taken it, I think, stolen the street sign, because that's a street sign that you would want in your house, right, if you could steal that sign. So I understand why somebody stole it. Don't steal, but you can understand why they would steal it. And so we're both very much city people. So we're driving down this road, and at first it's very pleasant. Then it gets like dirt. It becomes a dirt road, and the car is shaking. It's so uneven. I'm like, oh, this is not a good sign. Not a good sign. And I had to actually ask Joseph Citro, where is the Devil's Wash Bowl? I don't want to miss it. He said, the road will pass over the little waterfall. You'll see it. So that's how we knew where it was. And like, there was no way I was going to go down in there. It's like it's very steep and rocky, and you can see the water down there and the poison ivy. And I was just like, I'm not going down there. Like, I'll probably break a leg and then just die, and I'll be added to the Pigman legend, but that's not really what the goal of my life is to be part of a legend like that. And
not quite what I want to be remembered for.
No, exactly. Stupid city person dies in Vermont looking for pigmen.
I mean, if you're gonna go out, though, I mean,
it's a way.
It's a way to go, It's one way.
But we were there looking around, taking some videos, taking pictures, and there were no other cars. Like, it was really empty up there, and I think it was late September. It was around the equinox. Then we noticed like some big scat on the ground, like some big poop of some kind. Like, is it a human? Is it a bear? Is it a pigman? Like, we didn't know. As I say, we're city people. We don't know what these things are. We just got in the car and left. Like, we're done. Like, we're driving on from the Devil's Wash Bowl. We don't need to stick around and see what this monster may be.
The droppings can really be enough sometimes. I've been there sometimes where I'm like, oh my God, was a bear just here? That's it. Bye.
Even a bear, like, I don't want to,
It doesn't matter.
A bear would be just as bad as a pigman, probably, right? But people say the pigman lives somewhere in the Devil's Wash Bowl. There are little caves down there. People have found animal bones. People say there are little nests made of hay where he's sleeping at night and things like that. So that's kind of the basic legend. It's sort of evolved a little bit over time. There is a recent version of it, which I traced back to 2013 online. And in this one, I had some notes just to make sure I get everybody's name right. In 1951 in Northfield, there was a kid named Sam Harris. And Sam Harris was going to go out and celebrate Halloween in 1951. He was a teenager. And in Northfield, the night before Halloween is called Picket Night, which, if you look at the history of Halloween, often Halloween was like a multi-day celebration. So like trick or treat would happen on Halloween night, but then the night before is when like the vandalism would happen. Like when my mother grew up, it was called Cabbage Night in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Gate Night because you steal a gate, right? Picket Night because you rip the pickets off fences. So Picket Night.
Just general mischief for the teenagers.
Right, exactly. Like, yeah, lock up the farm animals and all that stuff that night. And so Sam sets out with toilet paper, eggs, and like candle wax to go deface neighbors' cars and things like that. His parents like, go have fun, don't get arrested. But he never ever comes back. Like, he disappears into the darkness of Picket Night, never comes back. So people are concerned. 3 years later, his mother is at home, sitting in her house, and she hears again something digging through the trash cans. So she turns on the porch light, and sees her son. She thinks it's her son, but he has a pig's head and is covered with short white hair. And he has like animal entrails that he's perhaps eating or something, which he squeals and throws on the porch at her and runs off into the darkness. Now, according to the legend gets a little, let's say, lurid at this point. The mother is so traumatized, like she can't, my son, he's become a pig man. She can't believe it. It's horrific. Not what I thought my son would be. So she kills herself out of despair, and supposedly by throwing herself into a pen of hungry pigs. So we're doubling up on the pig imagery here, right?
Goodness gracious.
I know. The Lord one. Now a local town historian, the person like runs the town historical society, is like, oh, this is all poppycock, whatever. This is not true. And she writes an article in the newspaper debunking the whole thing. Right? This is not true. There's no such thing as a pig man, blah, blah, blah. The day after that editorial is published, she is found dead with the word picket night carved into her body. So that's the story there, too. I don't know. This one is a little more horror movie influence. You can see the horror movie influence in that. But,
wow.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. I've heard a lot of the Pigman stories, like, just over the years, but I don't know if I've ever heard that one with the mother and the historian and then just that one.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Wow. Interesting. Very interesting story.
There's another one about teenagers camping at the Devil's Wash Bowl, and they're going to sleep in the caves, which of course is never a good idea to begin with, even if there's not a pig man. But they decide to sleep in these caves, and of course one of them is attacked by the pig man and perhaps beaten to death. But the person who posted that one online said it's fiction. Like he said, "Oh, this is surely fiction. This is not true."
Right.
So, yeah.
I will say Vermont has a lot of folklore and things. That's all I'm going to say right now about Vermont.
It's beautiful. It is beautiful.
Oh, it is. It is. And it's funny how exactly how you described going to the Devil's Wash Bowl is how it is. Now, we didn't make it to there because, like I said, it was muddy and I'm in
that road is not paved.
Oh, no. And it goes from oh, what a nice town to oh my God, it just goes downhill very quickly. No pun intended. But so we didn't make it there, but that's exactly how it is. And all of a sudden you're like, are we still in society? It just becomes a different thing,
Definitely, there's some abandoned buildings on the way there. We did see an abandoned farm up there. So it's sort of the town is very cute, but you get out of the town, it's a little more rural and rough up there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But worth a visit if you're bold and want to go try to see a pig man, right?
I agree. Yeah, as long as you're there through May through October, I think you're okay.
Yeah, once the snow hits, maybe not so much, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't go back there in the snow. Definitely not. It's probably not passable. Yeah.
So John has been very quiet about all this. John, have you gone to Vermont to look for Pigman?
Not specifically to look for Pigman. I do enjoy when the leaves change in the fall, though.
That is nice.
Oh, you're one of those. No, I'm kidding.
I'm
kidding.
I mean, I don't know. I like it. I like going up there. I think I like New Hampshire a little better than Vermont, but I'm
definitely. I live in eastern Massachusetts, so New Hampshire is easier for me to get to. Vermont's a little more drive, I think.
Yeah.
True.
And I feel like New Hampshire is just a little easier to navigate. They're kind of set up more for tourism and that sort of thing. More so.
Right.
Vermont is kind of there's probably a bunch of monsters living in the woods, and if you want to live here, cool. We don't know. We don't care. Have fun. Maple syrup and lots of fucking pop.
Yeah. Good dairy products. Yeah.
Don't drive off that road.
No kidding. No kidding.
Oh, Vermont. Good old Vermont. What about New Hampshire? Do we have any monster stories from New Hampshire?
I don't know. We must have some. I think I'm more Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts tonight. So I don't know. Can I jump onto another monster though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, by all means.
We're tracking through human-animal hybrids. I don't even know what time it is. How much time do we have? I don't want to.
We're at 7:37, so we got plenty of time.
A little time. Okay, lizard men. This one is weird because this is not a big popular monster are these lizard men. You don't see a lot of lizard men in Massachusetts. You don't even see a lot of lizards in Massachusetts, right? Maybe some salamanders. You see some snakes, but not a lot of lizards.
Yeah.
So, have you guys ever read any books by Albert Rosales? He puts out a series of books called Humanoid Encounters. And it's like this story is from Humanoid Encounters 2000 to 2009. So here's a whole series organized by year, like Humanoid Encounters 1945 to 1960, things like that. They're really great because just full of crazy, weird stories from all around the world. I get them on Kindle so that I can search through them for New England things specifically. But so he culls them from like old books, websites, social media, wherever you can find them. So they're just all encounters with humanoids, as the title would say. So this story is from Norton, Massachusetts, 2001. An unnamed young man who submitted the story somewhere online is walking home from work late at night. He works in a store of some kind, maybe a convenience store or whatever. So his shift is over. It's after midnight. He's walking home. And his house is like a mile away if he takes a shortcut through the woods. So he said, yeah, I'll take this shortcut. Whatever. I've lived here my whole life. I know the way. What can go wrong? Right? Famous last words. Mm-hmm. And these aren't even really super dense woods. It's near a road. So like you can see street lights. He can see cars. So just like a little, eastern Massachusetts patch of forest type of thing. So he's walking down the path on his way home, and he's tired, so he yawns. He makes a big yawn. Ugh, whatever. And then he hears something roar at him in response. He's like, oh, shit. And he sees in the street lights, a gigantic old humanoid lizard thing, which he says was about 8 feet tall, powerfully built, and had a face like a man. And so he sees this thing, powerfully built lizard thing, and then it disappears in a flash of light. And it's gone. And when he looks at his watch, it is now 1:45 a.m. and he left his job at like midnight. And he's like, oh, what happened to me in the last hour and 45 minutes as I was in these woods looking at this lizard man?
What? That's crazy.
Right?
First of all, that town is not far from me.
Oh, really? You should go, right?
Go check it out.
I don't have time to lose 2 hours in a mysterious lizard man encounter. I'm busy.
In the lizard forest. Yeah.
Nobody got time for that.
So
I'm so busy. But yeah, that's crazy. So the lost time. Yeah, that really sticks out. That's wow.
Right. That makes it seem like, oh, it's not. Like I said, I'm sort of skeptical, right, of some of these stories, but I do. Like some of it could be some sort of subconscious projection coming out of your mind, right? And I'm also open to someone who's like, oh, it's a spiritual experience or something like that. To me, makes more sense than thinking, oh, there actually is like a giant 8-foot humanoid physical lizard living in Norton, Massachusetts. Like that to me doesn't make as much sense as if someone said, oh, it was a spiritual being or I don't know what, something like that. To me makes more sense.
That does actually make sense.
In a way,
right. In a way, yeah. Like if you're gonna make sense out of the senseless, yeah, that makes it more palatable, I think, to be like, all right, well, it's like you said, a spiritual experience. What I actually find very interesting is all the encounters that, like you said, Sandwich, Massachusetts earlier. Like that's not. It's just that it's like it's populated. It's not like in the middle of nowhere.
It's like a suburban little area. Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like even it's one thing to be like, all right, well, Maine. You got northern Maine, which is just the wilderness. You got a lot of parts of Vermont, New Hampshire. They're literally wilderness. But like Massachusetts is particularly eastern. Is not particularly. It's got its moments, but
Yeah, it's not. It's not like vast, unadulterated virgin forest in eastern Massachusetts.
Right. Yeah.
Even more than a mile from a Dunkin' Donuts, right?
Exactly. Or several.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a Massachusetts bylaw. You cannot be able to go more than a mile without a Dunkin' Donuts.
It's true. Mm-hmm. There's an abandoned Dunkin' Donuts near me here, which to me seems somehow spooky. Like I feel like that is the place to do some like satanic ritual, like in the abandoned Dunkin' Donuts. With some weird energy is in there. You just know it, right?
Yeah, what happened there?
You don't just give up a Dunkies, kid.
What?
I know they
I'm
downsized.
horrified.
They moved. They combined with a convenience store across the street. So now, like, there's this abandoned Dunkin' Donuts, and then the new Dunkin' Donuts is part of a convenience store across the street. So it's weird to me, if you know what I mean. Like that seems like it's uncanny.
I mean, that's I think the creepiest story you've told so far.
Yeah. I feel
We'll
like I
do our
want to do
next
like
episode live from that Dunkin' Donuts. See what happens.
Right.
There'll still be donuts. They'll still be fresh.
Is anyone listening? I want a medium caramel, light ice, 2 sugars. Iced coffee appears on the floor.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's funny.
All right. So a little more about Lizard Man. So this now,
Yeah,
that was 2001. I have another story from supposedly 1994, and I have a person's name. This is a woman named Mona Kempka, who was a nurse. She lived in Framingham, Massachusetts. And so one night around 3:15 a.m., which you know is the witching hour, that 3 a.m. time, 3:15 a.m., she's asleep, but she feels somebody touching her hand as she's asleep. And so she opens her eyes and she sees a gigantic, powerfully built reptilian humanoid in her bedroom. And this is a quote, this is a description. I had to quote this because it's interesting. She says, "Its torso put the most proficient bodybuilder to shame. Its legs were like giant frog's legs, but only more developed muscularly. There was a mist covering its face. And the whole room is filled with a pink light as she sees this lizard monster in her bedroom touching her hand. This giant muscle-bound steroid lizard monster touching her hand."
what in the supernatural fuck was that?
I know, and then it disappears. Like it disappears. Okay, and she's like, "Oh, that was odd."
Did
and
she
so-
lose time as well?
Is she what?
Did she have lost time as well?
She didn't mention lost time, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did. She appeared after that in a TV show called, I got to get the title right, World's Strangest UFO Stories, which you can find online. I think I bought it on Amazon just to see it. World's Strangest UFO Stories. And she said that she thought it was a reptoid alien that had come to Earth. And do you know who David Icke is? He's kind of a conspiracy theorist who says, like, you know, the British royal family is actually lizard people, and lizard people run the Earth.
Right. I've heard things like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
So this
Yeah.
Mona said, "Oh, well, maybe this is proof that David Icke is right, that there are lizard people, because I saw one appear in my bedroom." Which is crazy, right? It's an interesting story. And it's interesting that both lizard men are really bulky, so maybe they're working out in Lizard Man planet, wherever they're from, or something like that. So she later changed her story. She still said she saw a reptilian thing in her house in Framingham, but she later said that she had been playing with a Ouija board earlier that night before she went to bed. And then the thing showed up. And so she thought perhaps it was Zozo the Ouija board demon. If you've ever heard of Zozo, Zozo the Ouija demon sort of shows up in pop culture around 2013. Somebody, I think from Oklahoma, named Darren Evans starts to post online that he had been playing with a Ouija board and contacted a demon named Zozo. And Zozo, you know, like would possess people, possess like Darren's girlfriend and cause trouble and like make, you know, scars appear on people's skin, all this awful stuff. So Zozo, the Ouija board demon, sort of like spread a little bit in kind of the paranormal occult circle. The name Zozo, like Z-O-Z-O, where it came from, nobody's quite sure. Like if there's an old Led Zeppelin album, which has what looks like Zozo written on the front of it. And that was Jimmy Page's like personal occult sigil that he had found in some grimoire, some book of magic. So it says Zozo. It's maybe like a symbol for his astrological sign. It's probably not even supposed to be red, but like when I was in high school, kids were like, oh, Zozo, right? Zozo is like this occult thing. So it's a weird confluence of like Led Zeppelin, Ouija, demons, and all this stuff. And there may have been, some people also say there's like a an account of a demon named Zozo in a French book from the 1800s. But none of them say he looks like a big muscle-bound lizard. But still, he could be, like, why not? Okay?
Wow.
I don't even know what to think about that one.
I know. I was kind of like, whoa. So much happening in that story.
Good story, so it's a good story. And interestingly, after I posted that on my blog, somebody emailed me who said they had worked with Mona at the hospital.
Oh.
And they said that she was very sincere in her beliefs, that she really believed all these things happened. Like, she was not a hoaxer. This was not a hoax on her part. Like, she told co-workers about these things that she had experienced as well. So she was like, legitimately had experienced something, whatever it was, and she was sincere that something strange had happened to her, which is also interesting to me. It was not just someone making up a story for attention, right? She really thought these things had happened to her.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of thinking about that. That's wow. And that someone emailed you. That's just a whole other layer. Like, oh, cool story. Interesting. Oh, wait, what? It's like more, it's a little more depth, like that's.
Yeah, it's like she's not just someone on a TV show. Like, she was a real person who had, like, a life.
You know what though? Like, I don't know where to go with a lot of this stuff, and I say this all the time. Every episode where we talk about something bizarre, which we do, I always say, like, I'm not saying there's one thing I know exists, and that's ghosts. I know they exist for sure. Beyond that, I don't know. But I have seen some crazy stuff. I've seen some things and experienced some things, like in the woods in Freetown.
Oh, yeah?
In Freetown. That was probably the craziest visual thing I've ever experienced. And sometimes you don't know what to make of it. But it's so bizarre that even when you recount it, you're like, yeah, but you don't even know. But, like, crazy things happen, and whether it is I don't know, was she awake? Was she under the influence of something? Was she on codeine? We don't know. Like, I've done some silly things on codeine by itself, like.
And I think, with that 3 a.m. hour, like, some psychiatrists, psychologists, whatever, say, like, that is when what's the thing that makes you sleep? The hormone in your body produces. You know what I mean?
Melatonin.
Melatonin. Like, that's often when you're at peak melatonin in your body. It's often when, like, your REM sleep is slowing down, other sleeps are taking over. That's often when people experience sleep paralysis. All these things happen around 3 a.m. So it's that weird, uncanny time. And I was talking about this with somebody else the other night, and they're like, it's like the darkest time of night. Like, 3 a.m., like, it's a long time till sunrise, and it's been a long time since you went to bed. You're just kind of, like, stuck there, and, like, this is it, right? This is the darkest time. Yeah. So, like, if you're going to see a giant muscle-bound reptile, that's probably when it's going to show up, right?
That would be the time.
Definitely going to be 3 a.m.
Definitely 3 a.m.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely a certain air at 3 a.m. I remember when I had newborns, and you're up in the middle of the night with the newborns, and it's bizarre. It's a different, nobody's awake. It's quiet, like it's a whole different world at that time. So God knows. I mean, that we could go into a whole other discussion, but I concur.
Yeah. Definitely weird.
It is a strange time.
But what strikes me is those two incidents are they're not too far from each other.
No,
those two locations are probably within 25 minutes, half hour without traffic. I mean,
and they both describe sort of a similar thing, right?
Right.
It's big, disappearing. It's large. It's not, like, skinny. It's not small. It's like, yeah. So I don't know what that says. I feel like, I've read a lot of these stories over the years and written about them. I feel like the only conclusion I ever draw is that people experience a lot of weird stuff, as you said, Mary. Like, people experience weird stuff. I don't know what any explanations are. Like, I do think a lot of people are sincere about the things they experience. Some people are hoaxers, which is what they are, but a lot of people are very sincere about what they experience, And some of the things are just obviously legends that are just kind of passed down, like, through generations, and are just more literary type of things. But some of them, people really do certain things. So.
Yeah, well, that's a first-hand account,
Right. Right. It's not just, oh, there is a lizard man lurking in the woods in Norton. It's like, oh, I saw a lizard man in Norton. I saw a lizard man in Framingham.
This is specifically what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a
I
different
think
vibe.
I've had a couple weird experiences, and you could be the most skeptical person in the world, but until you have an experience you can't explain, you know.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Right.
yeah.
You had
Yeah,
mentioned the Freetown State Forest, which we have
Yes.
been. My husband and I went there because I was writing about puckwudgies. So we said, oh, let's
Ooh.
Freetown State Forest. So let's talk a little bit about puckwudgies, I guess.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I would.
let's.
Yes.
So puckwudgies, the whole history of that is really interesting to begin with. Like, as I mentioned, like when the Puritans came to New England, they didn't bring any fairy folklore with them. And by fairy, I mean like a small, magical, living humanoid, right? It's not a ghost. It's not an alien, which is science fiction. It is small. It is magical. It is alive, right? And you see certain writers specifically say like, oh, we didn't bring any fairy folklore. Like Nathaniel Hawthorne says that in the Scarlet Letter that's mentioned. The writer John Greenleaf Whittier, who is like a Quaker poet from the Merrimack Valley, says the same thing. Like, we didn't bring that type of folklore with us. We brought all the harsher stuff. We brought the devil, the ghosts, the witches, but no fairies. Like, there are no fairies in New England. So you see some people repeat that. They didn't really know that, of course, there had been fairy folklore here from the Native Americans, particularly if you look at like Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, like the Passamaquoddy, the Penobscot, the Abenaki. They have like a really rich folklore about various sorts of little people who live in the woods. I won't get into all the details. And also, I'm terrible at saying the names in those languages. But you get like, generally there are, roughly speaking, they're like small little hairy humanoids who live in the woods. Sometimes they're good, like some of them are good, and some of them are malevolent, and some of them are sort of ambiguous, right? And as long as you treat them properly, they will treat you properly. And in the Native American stories, they're very much tied into the culture. Like the Passamaquoddy have creatures called, I'm gonna get the name wrong, but like a Makamwesuk or something like that, I think is the word. And these are like small hairy creatures, but they're also very like involved with the Catholic Church. Interesting, like, so they will punish people who violate the norms of the church. So there's a story in a book by Catherine Briggs where some people in the Passamaquoddy reservation are having, they want to have a dance, but it's during Lent, right? You shouldn't really be partying during Lent. They ask the priest's like, oh, sure, why not? We'll make this exception. We'll have a party during Lent. So they'll get together in like, I think the church basement, whatever, to have this dance. And they're playing music, whatever. And a kid comes in from outside and said, oh, I saw something in the woods. And it's like a small, hairy person. And he's staring at the church. And everyone's immediately like, oh, we know what that is. It's a Makamwasak. We have to shut this party down, or we're all in deep trouble. So they shut the party down and just go to bed, like no more, and they never have parties at Lent again because they know that this little humanoid is unhappy with them, breaking the rules about Lent. And so if you see one of these creatures, it can cause ill health or death or things like that. And they also have a story from that same area, from the Passamaquoddy, about men who tried to steal things from the church. They try to steal the wine and maybe like the candlesticks from the altar. And one of these little Makamwasak things shows up and like beats the crap out of them, and like because they're trying to steal from the church. So like it's very much incorporated like into the culture, right? So all this is happening in New England, but like John Greenleaf Whittier and Nathaniel Hawthorne, they don't know anything about this. They know nothing about these things, right? And then. So let me get the date right for this one. Okay, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, right? The Cambridge poet. That's 1850s. People love poetry. It's like a podcast of the time, right? They don't listen to podcasts; they listen to poetry.
So true.
So true. And so he writes "Song of Hiawatha," an epic poem based on Ojibwa folklore. And the Ojibwa are a Native American group that lives in the upper Midwest, like Michigan, North Dakota, places like that. And so in the Song of Hiawatha, there's a little section called The Death of Kwasind. And Kwasind is like this heroic Ojibwa man who is killed by these small magical little people called Pukwudgies. They don't like him and they kill him with their magic. Because Pukwudgies, the term comes from Ojibwa. It's an Ojibwa term. Pukwudgie is an Ojibwa term. It's not local to New England. Everyone's like, oh, Longfellow's great. We love this book, 1855, Song of Hiawatha. So maybe 50 years later, a guy named Thomas Weston writes a book called History of the Town of Middleborough, Massachusetts. He publishes that in 1906. He incorporates basically the story of Kwasind being killed by the Pukwudgies into the history of the town of Middleborough. He says, oh, this is authentic Middleborough Native American folklore. These Pukwudgies lived here in Middleborough, and they killed people. Totally not true. He's totally ripping off Longfellow and putting it in this book. But somehow that book then brings the term Pukwudgie from upper Midwest to Massachusetts. And then it takes off from there. A woman named Elizabeth Renard collects a book of Cape Cod folklore called Tales from the Narrow Land. I think it is right. Or just called The Narrow Land. Elizabeth Renard, The Narrow Land, in the 1930s. And she talked to some Wampanoag men who live on Cape Cod, and they tell her this story of Moshop, the sort of giant culture hero, and his family being overrun by Pukwudgies. And so they're using this term from Ojibwa and telling it to her, and she then publishes this book, which is moderately popular. So people are like, oh, yeah, Pukwudgie, they live on Cape Cod, right? And it goes from there. And then there's another book in the 80s, The Good Giants and the Bad Pukwudgies, comes out in 1983, which is a children's book which tells the same story that Elizabeth Renard had published in her book, which she wrote from the Wampanoag Men. So it's kind of like this literary history of the Pukwudgie terms, right? Which brings it to Massachusetts from the upper Midwest, where it doesn't, yeah.
So anytime you look up Freetown or my brain, the Bridgewater Triangle,
Yeah.
Anytime, this is all people talk about. Pukwudgie.
Right.
But it's crazy that they're not even that. It's just I didn't know that. I didn't know the origin of that story like at all. Like I knew that what they are, but I didn't know that the original origin that they're not even from. Like it's not even originating in this area.
Yeah, and I don't want to say like the term definitely is not from this area, and so maybe there were creatures. Like if you believe in fairy creatures, maybe there were fairy creatures here. And like even in Connecticut, the Mohegans, right, which is Mohegans, that's closer to Massachusetts. Talk about the Makia-Weesug, which are small creatures that live underground. They can turn invisible. They might steal your stuff if you misbehave. And they have their kind of ruler, kind of head is a woman named Squant or Granny Squannet, or she's like an old woman with really long hair. You also hear about her on Cape Cod among the Wampanoag. So there is some fairy lore, I think, even in southern Massachusetts, southern New England, but the whole term Pukwudgie came from the upper Midwest and from Longfellow kind of taking it from books that had been published, like Henry Schoolcraft, I think, was the person who wrote about the Ojibwa. So there's kind of this history of how the term gets here. And now it's so associated with Massachusetts, right? Like people are like, oh, Pukwudgies are a Massachusetts creature. But it came from this history from the 19th century, that brought it here. And people may still be seeing them, right? People do see them. So what are you seeing? Like, are you seeing something that already existed, and you're just giving another name? Which I often think the reason Pukwudgie caught on because it's fun to say. Like that is a fun word to say. It's an easy word to say. It sounds like Pukwudgie. Yeah, they're kind of little. They're kind of maybe cute. It's like a Pukwudgie.
It sounds kind of like comical almost.
Right.
Not comical, but kind of like. Oh,
So,
yeah,
he's adorable. Yeah. I want one.
Well, even funny when you were telling the story about how they killed the Ojibwa man, and I was like, do they kill people? I thought they were just silly little creatures. So even I thought that.
And that's the So, I mean, for people who don't know what Pukwudgies are, we can talk about Pukwudgies, right? Like in Massachusetts, contemporary Massachusetts folklore, legends, paranormal discourse. So like a Pukwudgie is like a small, maybe 2 to 3 foot high grayish, maybe grayish, right? Hairy humanoid. Um, Kind of like maybe they have a little pot belly. Sometimes people say they have like a nose, maybe like a dog or something like that. So they kind of like look like a little troll, very hairy back. Um, they're often found in the Bridgewater Triangle or the Freetown State Forest, as people encounter them. Have you read Christopher Balzano's book Dark Woods? Um, that is a great book. It's let me get the full title here. Dark Woods: Cults, Crimes, and the Paranormal in the Freetown State Forest.
Oh,
Um,
Freetown. Did you say Christopher Bell? I'm writing all these books.
Christopher Balzano, Balzano, Christopher Balzano. And that is a great book because he just kind of was a local person and he just collected stories from people who live near Freetown and had weird experiences. So it's like witch stories, ghost stories, weird murders, pukwudgies, all that stuff. So he has two really good pukwudgie stories, which have some similarities to things we've talked about, where like one of them, a woman named Joan, it's the 90s, she's walking her dog in the Freetown State Forest. And, the dog is leading her into the woods, and it kind of runs with her off the path, like it smells something, whatever. So it runs off the trail into the denser woods. And she sees, sitting on a log, a little man who's about 3 feet high, grayish, dog-like, kind of hairy. And she, of course, is like, oh, this is kind of freaky. Like,
Oh,
I shouldn't be seeing this. And so she just turns and gets the hell out, right? As you should, right? When you see that, you just leave.
just go.
Just go. So that's creepy. But then she goes back to her house, which is nearby Freetown. I don't know if she's in Freetown itself or just an adjacent town. And that night, she sees, looking in her window, the little man is looking in her window. And she's like, no, this is not good. And the little man appears sporadically outside her house, looking in her window until she moves. Like she leaves town, she moves to like Worcester or someplace like that. I'm done. Like no
Oh
more
my gosh.
for me. I'm moving to Worcester, wherever she goes. So
That's a interesting story.
right, and again, the thing looking in the window, these monsters love
Yeah.
to look in the window.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm kind of like, I've been to Freetown a lot of times, lots and lots of times, and Freetown is one of those places. I feel like every woods has like its own character, kind of. It's got its own like language, its own feeling. Freetown. So my my husband is more from that area, so he kind of grew up in that area. So he of course as a teenager went in there and did stupid things, and did the driving through at night. Him and I have driven through there at night. So he's got a lot of Freetown stories. He's seen a lot of things in there. But like Freetown is definitely one of those places. And you bring up that book. What did you say? Like murder, ghosts, and pukwudgie, like anything that you need.
Cults, crimes, and the paranormal.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Freetown just has all of it. Like whatever craziness you need, it's there. So yeah, like Freetown is. We want to do more talk about Freetown, but it's so exhaustive. Like there's so much stuff.
A lot.
There's just so much. So I mean, that story doesn't surprise me, honestly. I'm not surprised.
We went there a few years ago to look for pukwudgies or whatever. Not necessarily to look for them, but to see the place where people say they can be found.
Right.
And I will say, like, we go often hiking in various parks and things, right? Although we are city people. And, we parked in the parking lot, and it was near a firing range, so you could hear guns going off, right? Immediately that, to me, sets a unsettling tone to hear gunfire.
Right.
We park at the parking lot. We kind of walk down the trail into the woods, and where we had parked, like all the pine trees were dying because of like pine borer beetles. So like we hear gunfire, all the trees are dead. Like, okay, this is a welcoming entrance to this park. We were walking through the park. We didn't see many people, almost nobody. It was like late March, so the leaves weren't out, but it was windy and bright, and all the trees were rubbing against each other, squeaking here. And the landscape is weird because a lot of the trails are like almost sunken into the ground. Like you're walking these little trenches because I don't know if the soil is so soft or whatever. We walked for like an hour, didn't see anybody, and then we see like a group of teenagers all wearing hoodies, all like stoned out of their mind, in the middle of the woods, like, oh, this is just great. Like, it was all very unsettling.
Yeah.
And we were heading to the Assonet Ledge, which is this ledge supposedly haunted, and supposedly some people say Puckwudgies will push you off that ledge, right? And so we got to the ledge, and it's like a group of school children having a picnic. So like all the creepiness dissipates. Like it's children having a picnic. Like, okay, what were we so freaked out about? Like nothing to be freaked out about. But,
That's so Freetown. That story is such a Freetown story. Like it's school children having a picnic. Yeah, you're all like, that's great.
right, like it's a paranormal hospital. Then like, oh, the kids are just having a picnic, so they don't care.
Yeah, but that's how it is there. There's
Right.
there's crazy, and then people like enjoying the scenery. It's like, what the? This place is nuts.
So I've got one other. Here's another story about Freetown Forest and Puckwudgies, and we might be running out of time. So this is also from the Christopher Balzano book, and it's about a guy named Tom. So Tom is like a teenager hanging out in the Freetown State Forest, doing whatever teenagers do in that forest, right? Probably wearing a hoodie. And he sees a ball of light, like a will-o-wisp, like a glowing ball of light. So he decides the ball of light is leading down a trail, so he follows it, which to me is, I don't know if I would do that. He follows it down a trail into the woods, and it vanishes, like the ball of light is gone. He's like, oh, that was odd. But then he sees nearby a short man about 2 or 3 feet high, naked, gray, hairy, with some sort of wolf-like snout. And this is the creepy part. He says, the man disappears with an unearthly moan. Like, what type of moan is it? Is like a moan or like a moan? I don't know, but he disappears with an unearthly moan. So that is a little spooky.
Unearthly, yeah, that's
Unearthly.
just not of this earth.
Not of this era. And so Tom, the guy, the teenager, encounters this man one more time. He is like doing that thing you do when you're a teenager and you drive. He's like driving at night, and he goes and just parks in a parking lot near the forest, and he's just sitting there like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whatever, listening to his radio, like, I'm free, I'm in my car, listening to the radio. And he sees some light, some eyes kind of reflecting in the darkness. And they move forward, and it again is that little man that he had seen earlier. It looks like the same one staring at him in the car. And as the little man stares at the car engine revs up, and the radio gets really loud. And Tom's like, okay, I am out of here. So he like turns and leaves. So those are his 2 encounters with a Puckwudgie that he has there. So I feel like these like those paranormal encounters don't repeat, right? They're not replicable usually. If they were replicable, they wouldn't be paranormal, right? They would just be normal, right? If every time you could see these creatures walk across the road, like,
right,
people would do it all the time to go see them, but it's not how it works. Like, just in the right place at the right time, in the right mindset or whatever, and then you see it like, oh, there it is.
It's when things happen when you're just doing your regular stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
You don't know you're going to see anything, or you never know when something, even regular crazy stuff like that isn't paranormal at all. You see car accidents in front of you. Oops, there it is. I had no idea that was going to happen. Like this was a similar thing. It was just, oh, there it is. What? it's yeah. So Freetown.
It would go again, but
yeah.
In the daytime. I only go in the daytime to these places. As I say, like, I'm not a ghost hunter or anything, so I like to visit the space and see it and feel the history, but I don't usually go to these places at night.
Yeah. We tend to avoid nighttime, but every so often we get a little bit froggy and we're like, oh, let's do it. Okay. We've had our less than intelligent moments, and it's interesting. A lot of them, like our Gettysburg experience was at night. And again, it's because we were out gallivanting, being idiots. I truly believe that we, I will say, and I've said this a lot, I don't want to get all into this, but there is a certain respect I think you have to have, a certain respect for that you have to have. And when we went to Gettysburg, I don't want to say we were being disrespectful, but we were being silly. It was like we were kid-free, and we were just, being silly. And I truly believe it was like no, you need to respect these things. And from that point, I was like, no shit. Like, after that experience, it was like, wow, all right, yeah, you do. You need to have a reverence of some kind, or like a,
Yeah, I
you
agree.
know what
Even
I mean?
if it's particularly like graveyards and places like that,
Mhm.
like I'm always very cautious, respectful in graveyards, whether or not there are ghosts or whatever. I just feel like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, agreed.
I can remember, this is a goofy story, but when I was a kid riding my bike with my friend through a big cemetery where I grew up in Haverhill, and we were riding our bikes, and I said something like, "Oh, we have to be careful about the dead people or whatever." And my friend's like, he laughed like, "I'm not afraid of dead people." He immediately fell off his bike, skidded, scraped up both knees, like, okay.
See,
Oh, jeez.
exactly. Yeah,
Maybe I
Yep.
am afraid of dead people. Maybe we should go home.
yeah.
Hmm.
Oh goodness.
So
Well,
yeah, what are you guys thinking? Do you have any other stories, Peter? Or
I'm kind of probably running a little dry. I could tell some mermaid stories, but we don't have too much time left, do we? I don't think. I've been
yeah, I think
looking.
yeah, we'll maybe table the mermaids for next time.
but I mean, on that note, I'm really glad you came on the show. Like, this was you're such an awesome storyteller, and it's so cool just
Thank you.
listening to all the stories you've amassed. I think that was when I heard you on the Haunted Hotels podcast. That was the thing. I was like, oh my gosh, he's just got these stories. This is amazing. This is great. I love just hearing the local stuff too. It's really cool, and I'm really glad you're here to, I don't know, just to talk with us.
Yeah, it's
Really
been a
appreciate
pleasure. It's
it.
been great. I love hearing your stories too. That's good.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Kindred
And,
spirit.
and yeah, oh, most definitely. And if people want to find you, where, like, find your work? I know you have 2
The
books. Is it?
blog is the two books, Legends of the Lore of the North Shore, which is my first one, and then Witches and Warlocks of Massachusetts, which is just witch stories. I love a witch story set as like as many
Mm-hmm.
witch stories as I could fit in that book. And after I wrote the book, I'm like, oh, I should have included this one, or what about this one? But it's too late.
I know there's
Um,
always more.
that's from like the 1600s to the 21st century witch stories in there. And then
Nice.
and then also my blog, newenglandfolklore.blogspot.com, which I update less frequently than I used to, but I'm working on a new post now about H.P. Lovecraft and some witch stories that he knew about. So
Oh yeah.
Lovecraft, interesting.
yeah. It's on a totally different topic. So.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Peter. It's been a great episode. I'd love to hear the stories. I loved everything we talked about for sure. I appreciate you
Yeah,
coming on.
definitely.
Well, great. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you.
Till next time, guys.